What happens when one of Hollywood's most composed and private stars walks into a studio known for chaos and unfiltered opinions, and ends up pushed to her limit on live television? Before we dive in, make sure you subscribe to Prime Narrator, and don't forget to like, comment, and share, because what you're about to hear is one of the most tense, unguarded moments ever caught on daytime TV. It began like any other morning at The View. The studio lights burned bright, the audience clapped to the beat of the familiar theme song, and Whoopi Goldberg's trademark grin opened the show. But beneath that casual cheer, something electric hummed in the air, because today's guest wasn't just another celebrity promoting a movie. Today's guest was Scarlett Johansson, a woman whose calm poise and polished demeanor had long kept her safe from Hollywood's talk show tempests. That calm was about to be tested. Scarlett had just arrived, hair pulled back into a clean bun, wearing a simple black dress that contrasted sharply against the show's vibrant backdrop. She'd been invited to promote her new film, an indie drama about identity, motherhood, and resilience. But as her team warned her in the green room, The View had a reputation for taking discussions off script. "Just keep it light," her publicist whispered. "If they try to steer it political, pivot back to the film." Scarlett nodded, smiling faintly. She'd done hundreds of interviews. How bad could this be? The applause faded. Whoopi leaned forward. "Please welcome the amazing, talented Scarlett Johansson." Scarlett stepped out to an ocean of claps and cheers. She smiled, waved, and took her seat at the table beside Whoopi, Sunny Hostin, and Joy Behar. The usual small talk began. How great the movie looked, how striking Scarlett was in person. But even then, something in Whoopi's tone felt heavier than usual. "So, Scarlett," Whoopi began, hands clasped on the desk, her voice deep and deliberate. "You've played a lot of strong women on screen. But lately people online have been saying that some of your casting choices were, let's say, controversial. What's your take on that?" Scarlett blinked, slightly caught off guard, though her face stayed composed. "Well," she said evenly, "I think every actor's job is to explore humanity in all its forms. My intention has always been to tell meaningful stories." Joy leaned in, smirking. "But you can understand why some people found it tone-deaf, right? Taking on roles that people thought should have gone to someone else." Scarlett gave a small nod. "I understand that conversation. I also believe in creative freedom and in learning from choices. I think," Whoopi interrupted softly, her tone shifting. "But isn't that a bit of a privilege? Being able to say you can learn after you've already taken a role someone else might never get a chance to audition for." A ripple of tension moved through the audience. Scarlett hesitated, her fingers tapping the table once. The air thickened, and even the studio crew behind the cameras seemed to hold their breath. She smiled again, but this time the smile was tight. "I think everyone learns in their own time. I've been open about my experiences and my mistakes. But I don't think it's fair to define my career by one controversy." Joy glanced toward Whoopi. Whoopi didn't break eye contact. "But people are defined by their choices," Whoopi said quietly. "Especially in this industry. You know that." Scarlett's eyes flickered. The camera zoomed in, catching that subtle shift, the moment her patience began to thin. The audience sensed it too. Some murmured. Others laughed awkwardly as if to break the silence. Sunny tried to smooth things over. "Let's not forget the film," she interjected. "Which, by the way, touches on those very themes, identity, second chances." But Whoopi wasn't done. Sure, she said, cutting Sunny off. "But we're talking real life here, not movies. Because when you're as famous as Scarlett Johansson, people expect awareness. Don't you think that's fair?" Scarlett inhaled deeply. "I do," she said slowly. "But I also think sometimes discussions like this get framed unfairly, especially toward women. That hit differently." A few audience members clapped. Scarlett continued, her voice sharpening. "Men make mistakes all the time, and they're allowed to evolve quietly. Women are expected to publicly apologize, perform guilt, and prove they've changed. I don't think that's equality. I think that's punishment." A hum of approval moved through the crowd, but Whoopi's expression remained unreadable. "Interesting," she said finally. So you think you've been punished? Scarlett tilted her head. I think I've been held to a different standard. That's not bitterness, that's fact. The studio seemed to freeze for a second. It was that rare kind of TV silence, the kind that feels alive. Scarlett sat up straighter. I'm proud of the work I've done, the conversations my films have started. But I also think it's time to move forward. I'm not going to sit here and relitigate the same thing over and over. And then she looked directly at Whoopi. Especially not when the people doing the relitigating should know better. Gasps erupted. Whoopi raised her brows, lips tightening. Should know better? She repeated, almost in disbelief. Scarlett didn't flinch. Yes. You've been in this industry a long time. You've seen how women are treated when they speak up, how easily their narratives get twisted. I came here to talk about my film, not to defend my humanity. The tension was now undeniable, like a storm hovering just above the table. Joy tried to break it with humor. Okay, let's not start a cage match before commercial, she joked, but the laughter was nervous. Scarlett gave a polite smile. No cage match. Just honesty. Whoopi's face softened, but only slightly. Fair enough, she said. Honesty's good. But when you sit in that chair, you know we're going to ask the real stuff. That's what people watch for. And I respect that, Scarlett replied. But there's a difference between a question and an accusation. That line landed hard. The producers could be seen offstage signaling to cut to break, but Whoopi ignored them. She leaned in closer, lowering her voice but not her intensity. You know, Scarlett, I actually like you. I think you're smart, thoughtful. But sometimes when people in your position talk about double standards, it sounds like they're out of touch. You've got millions of dollars of platform privilege, so when you say you're being punished, people might not buy that. Scarlett's jaw tightened. I didn't say I was a victim, she said. I said I was tired of being mischaracterized. Her words hung in the air like glass, sharp, reflective, and fragile. For a heartbeat, no one spoke. Then Whoopi leaned back, giving a half smile that didn't reach her eyes. Fair. But mischaracterized by who? The media? Or the people who just don't agree with you? Scarlett met her gaze. Maybe both. But when you have a platform like this, your words shape those perceptions. So, I just ask that we use that power with care. The audience clapped again, this time louder, almost protective of her. Whoopi looked at the crowd, then back at Scarlett. Oh, don't worry, honey, she said, her tone dipping into something sarcastic yet sly. I always use my power carefully. I've been doing this longer than most of your co-stars have been alive. Scarlett smiled coolly. Then you should understand exactly what I mean. And with that, the segment finally cut to commercial. The cameras dimmed, but the tension didn't. Whoopi leaned back, muttering something to Joy, who gave a half laugh. Scarlett sat quietly, her hands clasped on the table. Her publicist rushed to the edge of the stage, whispering frantically to a producer. Someone in the audience, still whispering, said what everyone was thinking. Did Scarlett Johansson just check Whoopi Goldberg on live TV? As the show cut to a colorful advertisement, Scarlett exhaled slowly. She could feel the tremor of adrenaline still in her chest. She wasn't angry, she was steady, centered. But she knew that when the cameras came back, this conversation wasn't over. Because Whoopi Goldberg wasn't the kind of woman who let someone else have the last word. When the cameras came back, the audience cheered again. But this time, it felt different. There was a nervous energy running through the crowd, like everyone knew they were about to watch something volatile. Whoopi's smile returned for the broadcast, but it was tighter now, more mechanical. The theme music faded out. Scarlett, sitting across from her, had regained her composure, shoulders relaxed, eyes calm. But you could tell she was still alert, ready. The tension from before the commercial hadn't vanished. It had only gone quiet, like a storm waiting for the next flash of lightning. Whoopi opened the segment with a line that felt casual but carried an edge. All right, we're back with Scarlett Johansson, who's starring in a powerful new film about identity and redemption. And speaking of redemption, she added with a hint of amusement, let's talk about how Hollywood handles that word these days. Scarlett's lips curved slightly. That's a big topic. Oh, we love big topics, Whoopi said, laughing. The audience followed, but her laugh didn't quite reach her eyes. Sunny jumped in to steer things toward safety. The film really does dive into what it means to forgive yourself, she said warmly. It's beautifully done, Scarlett. I actually cried watching the ending. Scarlett smiled genuinely. Thank you. That means a lot. But before the moment could settle, Joy Behar leaned forward, chin in hand, eyes glinting with curiosity. I have to ask, she said, when you take on these emotional roles, does it ever feel like you're also trying to say something about yourself? Like, working through your own past choices through your characters? Scarlett hesitated, just long enough for the question to sting. I think every actor brings something personal to their work, she said carefully. But I don't use my roles to cleanse myself. I use them to explore empathy. Joy nodded, pretending to understand. But you can see why people might see it that way, right? Like, therapy on film. Scarlett laughed softly, though her tone was controlled. If I need therapy, I'll go to a therapist, not a film set. The audience laughed, breaking the tension for a brief moment. But Whoopi wasn't laughing. She was watching Scarlett closely, as if reading between every word. So, Scarlett, she began, when you talk about empathy, do you think Hollywood actually practices it? Because from what I've seen, it's more about optics than understanding. Scarlett turned to face her. You're not wrong, she admitted. There's a lot of performance, both on screen and off. People want to look progressive without actually changing anything. That honesty caught Whoopi off guard for a second. So you're saying even the people who criticized you might not be as righteous as they claim? Scarlett's eyes flickered toward the audience. I'm saying people love outrage more than they love progress. A murmur rolled through the studio. Whoopi smirked faintly. That's a bold thing to say. It's a true thing to say, Scarlett replied. The crowd reacted audibly this time, half cheering, half murmuring. Sunny shifted uncomfortably in her seat. There's definitely some truth in that, she said softly. Whoopi leaned back, folding her arms. But when you say that, don't you think you risk sounding dismissive of people who were genuinely hurt or upset? Scarlett looked down for a moment, then back up, meeting her gaze with quiet intensity. I think we have to distinguish between genuine accountability and performative outrage. The internet doesn't care about growth. It cares about attention. And too often, even good people get flattened into villains because it makes better headlines. For a split second, the room was silent again. Even Whoopi paused. Scarlett continued, voice calm but fierce. I've spent years trying to do better, to listen, to evolve. But at some point, you realize that no amount of explaining will satisfy people who don't actually want to understand. The audience applauded. Whoopi nodded slowly, perhaps conceding a little ground. I get that. I do. But I also think people deserve space to voice their hurt. They do, Scarlett agreed. But it has to go both ways. Otherwise, we're just performing compassion, not practicing it. That struck something. A few people in the front row even stood and clapped, though the applause quickly died down as the producers gestured for calm. Joy jumped in again, sensing an opportunity for levity. Well, at least you're not dodging the tough stuff. You'd make a great politician. Scarlett smiled. No thanks. I prefer scripts where I can rewrite the ending. Laughter rippled through the room, but Whoopi wasn't done. So, she said suddenly, you've talked about women being held to higher standards. Do you think you hold yourself accountable enough? Or are you saying people should just move on because you're tired of hearing it? The air turned cold. Scarlett blinked once, then twice. Her tone was calm, but her words came out precise and razor-edged. I don't think accountability expires. But I also think there's a difference between accountability and obsession. If people want me to learn, I have. If they want me to disappear, I won't. The audience reacted again, louder now, emboldened. Some cheered, others gasped. Whoopi sat up, adjusting her glasses. No one's saying you should disappear, she replied. But you can understand why people might feel you represent a certain kind of Hollywood disconnect. Scarlett's voice dropped. You mean being successful? That got a laugh, Sharp, nervous, too loud. Whoopi gave a short chuckle. No, I mean being insulated. Living in a world where criticism feels like persecution. Scarlett's expression shifted slightly, more serious now. I've lived in the public eye since I was 13. I've been praised, attacked, analyzed, and misunderstood for most of my life. Trust me, I know the difference between criticism and cruelty. Her tone was unwavering. Every syllable landed clean. The studio went quiet again. Scarlett leaned forward slightly. And you know what's interesting, Whoopi? The people who say celebrities should just take it never stop to ask why certain voices are targeted more than others. It's not about the work. It's about control. Whoopi studied her. You think you're being controlled? Scarlett smiled faintly. I think the narrative around women in power always tries to control them by making them defend their right to exist in spaces they've earned. That line hit like a thunderclap. The audience erupted in applause, almost standing this time. Whoopi stayed quiet, letting it pass. But something flickered across her face, a mix of respect and defiance. Sunny nodded, softly adding, There's truth in that. There's still a double standard. We all see it. Scarlett relaxed slightly, though her pulse was still visible in the small movement of her throat. Joy looked toward Whoopi, sensing the tension still simmering. You okay over there, Whoop? You look like you're about to start a monologue. Whoopi smiled thinly. Oh, I'm fine. I just like to understand people's truth before I respond. Scarlett tilted her head. Then ask me something honest. The room tensed again. Whoopi looked at her, eyes steady. All right, here's an honest one. Do you ever feel guilty for being the face of stories that maybe weren't yours to tell? Scarlett didn't answer immediately. Her silence filled the room. You could hear the faint hum of the cameras. Then she said quietly, Every artist feels guilt, but guilt without action is useless. I've taken that guilt and turned it into awareness, into change. And I hope people see that growth instead of just the past. Whoopi didn't respond right away. For a moment, the two women simply looked at each other. Two icons from different generations, different wars, each refusing to back down. The crowd stayed still, caught between awe and unease. Finally, Whoopi nodded slowly. That's fair, she said, her voice lower now. But you know what? Growth doesn't always make people forgive. Sometimes they just stop listening. Scarlett smiled sadly. Then maybe that says more about them than it does about me. The air crackled again. Joy looked to the producers off stage, mouthing commercial. They shook their heads. They wanted this to play out. Ratings gold. Sunny tried again to cool the temperature. It's fascinating hearing both sides, she said, because what you're both touching on is the power of perception and how easily it can turn. Whoopi leaned back, smirking. Oh, perception's everything in this business. You can be America's sweetheart one year and a villain the next. Ask anyone. Scarlett gave a small laugh, but there was no humor in it. I don't have to ask. I've lived it. That was it. The moment that made the audience gasp. Because it wasn't defensive anymore. It was real. Vulnerable. Whoopi looked at her again, longer this time, as though reevaluating everything. Maybe that's what makes you interesting, she said finally. You still show up. Scarlett nodded once. Always. And then finally, the cue card came. Whoopi turned back to camera, her voice smooth again. All right, we're going to take another quick break. When we come back, Scarlett Johansson talks about her next project, and maybe we'll see a softer side of her. Scarlett laughed lightly, the faintest glint of irony in her eyes. Maybe. The audience clapped. The lights dimmed. As the cameras cut, Whoopi and Scarlett exchanged a silent look, neither hostile nor warm. Just understanding. Two women who'd both fought their own wars with perception. But the break didn't ease the tension backstage. The crew whispered. The producers argued quietly about whether to lean into the confrontation or steer it back to promotion. Scarlett's publicist stood near the monitor, arms crossed, whispering, We should wrap after this next segment. And Whoopi, back at the desk, said quietly to no one in particular, She's tougher than I thought. The show would come back soon. And when it did, both women knew they weren't finished. As the cameras rolled again, the air inside the studio felt charged, quiet, but tense, like the moment right before a thunderstorm breaks. The host smiled, the audience cheered, but everyone could sense it. Something unspoken was still simmering beneath the surface. Whoopi Goldberg leaned slightly toward the camera, her voice as smooth as silk but her eyes alert. "Welcome back to The View. We're here with Scarlett Johansson, who's been giving us a lot to think about this morning." Laughter from the audience, uneasy, polite. Scarlett smiled, composed, though her shoulders were a little stiffer than before. "It's been an interesting conversation," she said lightly. Joy Behar grinned. "Interesting is one word for it. My stomach's been in knots since the first segment." Whoopi chuckled. "You? Nervous? That'll be the day." The room relaxed just slightly, enough to breathe, but only for a moment. Whoopi turned her attention back to Scarlett. "You know, Scarlett, one thing that stood out earlier. You said women are expected to perform guilt. That stuck with me. But I've got to ask, do you think people misread you because you sometimes come across as, well, distant?" Scarlett blinked, surprised by the phrasing. "Distant?" Whoopi nodded thoughtfully. "Yeah, controlled. Like you're holding something back. People don't always trust what feels too polished." Scarlett tilted her head, choosing her words with care. "I understand that. But being polished doesn't mean being insincere. I'm careful because I've had to be. Every word I say ends up dissected, twisted, turned into a headline." Joy chimed in, teasing but blunt. "Oh, trust me, I've been there. I said one thing about politics in 2016, and I still get hate mail." Laughter. Relief. For a second, the mood lightened again. But Whoopi wasn't done. She leaned forward, elbows on the desk, tone lower now. "See, that's the thing. When you live in a world that dissects everything you say, how do people know when they're getting you, and not the version your PR team wants out there?" A murmur rippled through the audience. Scarlett's expression didn't crack, but something in her posture shifted, her spine straighter, her jaw set. "I think people can tell when someone's authentic," she said firmly. "And I don't let anyone else script my truth." Whoopi arched a brow. "Even now?" Scarlett met her gaze. "Especially now." That line hit like a match to dry air. The audience reacted instantly. Cheers, claps, a few gasps. Sunny Hostin smiled faintly, glancing between them. "See, this is why people love this show," Sunny said. "Because it's not rehearsed. It's not safe. It's real." Whoopi laughed softly. "Oh, it's real, all right." Scarlett's eyes didn't leave hers. "You invited me here to be real. I'm giving you that." "Good," Whoopi replied. "Because a lot of people come here to control their image. But the truth has a funny way of showing up anyway." Scarlett's smile thinned. "Then maybe that's the difference between me and them. I'm not here to control anything. I'm here to reclaim it." Applause again. The crowd was eating it up. Joy shook her head, laughing. "This is better than half the movies I've seen this year." Scarlett laughed too, but her laugh had an edge. No scriptwriter could make this up. Sunny leaned forward. "Scarlett, earlier you mentioned that silence sometimes feels safer than speaking out. Do you still feel that way even now?" Scarlett exhaled, her voice soft but steady. "Silence can protect you, but it can also erase you. I stayed quiet for a long time because I thought that was the mature thing to do. But I've realized silence doesn't earn you peace. It just lets other people write your story for you." The audience clapped again, some standing. Whoopi waited for the noise to die down before responding. "That's powerful," she said. "But I think that's where people struggle with you. Because some folks feel like they did try to understand your story, and you shut them out." Scarlett's tone sharpened slightly. "I didn't shut them out. I stepped back. There's a difference." Whoopi tilted her head. "And what's that difference?" "One comes from arrogance," Scarlett said. "The other comes from exhaustion." That landed hard. The audience quieted completely. Even Joy, for once, said nothing. Scarlett continued, more softly now. "I've spent years being everyone's target and everyone's mirror. If I speak, I'm too loud. If I stay silent, I'm cold. You reach a point where you stop trying to win the narrative and just focus on being truthful." Whoopi nodded slowly. So what's your truth then? Scarlett paused, then said quietly, that I've made mistakes, but I've never stopped trying to do better. And I'm done apologizing for existing in the process. That was it. The crowd erupted. Cheers, whistles, applause, people were on their feet. Even Whoopi cracked a small smile. Joy looked at the audience, half joking. All right, folks, calm down before security thinks we started a rally. Whoopi waited until the noise faded, then asked, softly, carefully, you really don't regret anything? Scarlett looked at her. Of course I do. Regret is part of being human. But I don't believe in letting regret define me. I believe in moving forward. Moving forward, Whoopi repeated. That's easy to say. Harder to live. Scarlett nodded. Then maybe we all need to stop pretending it's easy. Whoopi gave a low laugh. Fair point. But her eyes still studied Scarlett closely, as if searching for something deeper. Let me ask you this, she said suddenly. If you could go back to the moment when people first started criticizing you, if you could speak directly to them, what would you say? Scarlett hesitated. The question hit somewhere deep. I'd say, I hear you, she said slowly. And I wish we could talk instead of attack. I wish people could see the intention behind the art before they burn it down. Because at the end of the day, I don't make movies to offend anyone. I make them to connect. That touched the audience. Some even murmured amen. Whoopi nodded, her tone softening. That's honest. I respect that. Scarlett smiled faintly. Thank you. Then Whoopi added quietly. But you know, Scarlett, sometimes the way you say things makes people feel like you're untouchable. Like nothing gets through to you. Scarlett's expression changed, her calm exterior cracking just slightly. You think I don't feel it? I think you hide it well, Whoopi said. Scarlett's voice dropped. I hide it because if I showed it, people would call it weakness. That silence again, thick, heavy, real. Scarlett went on, her tone trembling but steady. People forget that behind every headline is a person. I've had nights where I couldn't sleep because of what people said about me, about my choices, my character, my worth. But I learned something. You can't heal in front of people who don't want you to. A hush fell over the crowd. Even Whoopi's expression softened. That's a heavy truth, she said quietly. Scarlett looked down, then back up. Yeah, but it's mine. For the first time, Whoopi didn't challenge her. She simply nodded. You're tougher than you look. Scarlett smiled faintly. So are you. That drew laughter, light and genuine, breaking the tension like sunlight after rain. Joy clapped her hands together. Finally, a compliment. I thought one of you was going to throw a mug. Whoopi chuckled. Oh, please. We save that for Fridays. The audience laughed again, the heaviness easing. But there was something different now, something mutual between Scarlett and Whoopi. Not animosity. Recognition. Sunny leaned in, smiling warmly. You know, I think this conversation is going to stick with people. Because what you two did here, it wasn't a fight. It was two women showing what strength looks like in real time. Whoopi nodded. Yeah, strength doesn't always mean shouting. Sometimes it's just standing your ground. Scarlett met her eyes. Or knowing when not to back down. A final ripple of applause. The producer held up a cue card. 1 minute left. Whoopi turned back to the camera, smoothing her notes, but clearly still caught in the energy of the exchange. We've had one hell of a conversation this morning, she said with a grin. Scarlett Johansson's new film hits theaters this weekend. And if it's anything like today's discussion, people are going to be talking. Scarlett laughed softly. I think that's safe to say. Whoopi smiled. Well, thank you for being here. For being honest. Scarlett nodded. Thank you for asking the hard questions. Whoopi chuckled. You handled them better than most. The audience clapped again. As the music swelled and the show cut to its final break, Scarlett reached across the table and shook Whoopi's hand, a brief, sincere gesture. Their eyes met for just a second, and in that second, something passed between them. Not friendship, not forgiveness, but understanding. As Scarlett walked off stage, the applause still echoing behind her, she caught her reflection in one of the cameras. Her expression was calm, but her eyes shimmered with the weight of what had just happened. She knew it was over, on air at least. But the world outside these studio walls? That was about to light up. Tomorrow, her name would be everywhere. Clips, headlines, hashtags. And this time, she wasn't going to hide from any of it. When the episode of The View ended that morning, the studio fell into a strange kind of hush, half relief, half shock. The applause faded, the lights dimmed, and crew members exhaled as if they'd been holding their breath for the entire hour. Scarlett Johansson had already left the stage, escorted by a quiet assistant and her publicist, her stride brisk but steady. Whoopi remained seated, flipping through her notes, the corners of her mouth curved into a faint, unreadable smile. But outside that studio, a storm was already forming. Within minutes, the first clips hit social media. The moment Scarlett said, "Silence doesn't earn you peace, it just lets other people write your story for you," exploded across TikTok and X. Users replayed the moment again and again, some cheering, others dissecting it like a cultural battlefield. Scarlett Johansson just ended Whoopi Goldberg live on The View. Whoopi pushed too far, and Scarlett didn't flinch. Finally, someone who doesn't let these hosts talk over them. And then the opposing wave. Scarlett still doesn't get it. She's playing the victim again. Whoopi asked fair questions. Scarlett got defensive. By noon, hashtag Scarlett versus Whoopi was trending at #1 worldwide. Clips flooded every platform. Edits appeared with dramatic background music, slow-motion zooms, reaction emojis. Commentators weighed in, celebrity bloggers, culture critics, even other actors. The confrontation had gone far beyond television. It had become a referendum on authenticity, feminism, and fame itself. Inside a quiet car heading toward Manhattan, Scarlett scrolled through her phone. The numbers rising, notifications blurring. Every ping carried a new headline, a new opinion, a new judgment. Her publicist, Maya, sat across from her, reading messages in silence. Finally, she said softly, "You broke the internet." Scarlett smirked faintly. "I didn't mean to." "You never do," Maya said, half laughing. "But this time feels different. They're not just arguing about what you said. They're actually listening." Scarlett looked out the window, the city lights flashing across her reflection. Listening or waiting for something to twist? Maya didn't answer. Meanwhile, over at The View's production office, the atmosphere was electric. Ratings projections were through the roof. Producers exchanged looks that mixed exhilaration and disbelief. Joy Behar, walking into the staff lounge with her coffee, sighed. "Well, I guess we're viral again. My nephew just texted me a meme of Whoopi and Scarlett in a boxing ring." Whoopi appeared a moment later, sunglasses on, her tone dry. "Let me guess, he put money on her?" Joy grinned. "He said it was a draw." Sunny Hostin, always thoughtful, joined them, phone in hand. It's not just memes. People are genuinely debating the conversation. About vulnerability, image, power. It struck a nerve. Whoopi nodded slowly. "Good. That's what the show's supposed to do." But even she could feel it. This wasn't just another celebrity clash. It had hit something raw, something personal for millions watching. Back online, the analysis deepened. Entertainment networks replayed the exchange with commentary. News anchors called it a defining TV moment. Editorials appeared within hours, some praising Scarlett for her composure, others criticizing her tone as calculated. A viral tweet read, "Whoopi Goldberg tried to test Scarlett Johansson's empathy. Instead, Scarlett showed strength in silence. Women can be calm and powerful." Another countered, "Scarlett still doesn't understand accountability. Poise isn't the same as growth." By nightfall, late-night talk shows were already making jokes about it. One host quipped, "Next week on The View, Scarlett Johansson and Whoopi Goldberg in Civil War II." The audience laughed, but underneath, people weren't laughing. They were arguing, defending, empathizing. Scarlett had unintentionally tapped into something bigger than herself. That night, Scarlett sat alone in her apartment. The city hummed outside, a low, restless pulse. Her phone vibrated nonstop, but she'd silenced it hours ago. On her laptop, she played the episode back, not to relive it, but to see it through other eyes. She watched the way she sat, how she smiled, how she didn't flinch when Whoopi pressed her hardest. For the first time in a long while, she saw not just an actress, but a woman fighting to stay grounded in a world that constantly demanded she perform her pain. Her reflection on the dark screen behind the playback glimmered like a ghost. "You did fine," she murmured, though her voice wavered slightly. Then a new sound, her phone vibrating again, but this time it was a name she didn't expect. A message from Whoopi. It read, "You held your ground. That's rare. Don't let the noise drown out what mattered." Scarlett stared at the message for a long time. Then she typed back simply, "Thank you. You asked the questions I needed to answer." A moment later, Whoopi replied with one final line. "Good. Then it was worth it." Scarlett set the phone down, feeling something inside her settle, a strange mix of exhaustion and release. For once, she didn't care what the headlines said. The moment had already transcended them. By the next morning, the ripple effects had reached every corner of Hollywood. Talk shows replayed the moment in full. Bloggers wrote op-eds titled Scarlett Johansson's most honest interview yet. Some called it her redemption. Others called it performance art. But the truth was simpler. For once, Scarlett had stopped defending herself and simply spoke. A journalist outside her New York apartment shouted, "Scarlett, any comment on The View?" She smiled politely and said, "No comment today, just gratitude." That clip, too, went viral. People began quoting her lines online. "Silence doesn't earn you peace." One comes from arrogance, the other from exhaustion. They became mantras, stitched into TikToks, posted on Instagram stories, whispered in think pieces about women's emotional labor and public image. And Whoopi. She addressed it on The View 2 days later. Sitting with her co-hosts, she said, "Look, people think that when we challenge guests, it's about conflict. It's not. It's about conversation. Scarlett Johansson came here, and she didn't back down. I respect that. That's how truth happens, when nobody runs from it." The audience applauded. Sunny added, "It's rare we get to witness that kind of real vulnerability on live TV. It wasn't scripted. It was human." Whoopi smiled, eyes gleaming. "And that's what this table's for." The camera lingered on her face, serious, proud, unbothered. That afternoon, Scarlett reposted a clip of that segment to her Instagram story with a single caption. "Conversation, not confrontation." The post broke 1 million likes in an hour. Days later, she appeared at a charity gala in New York. Cameras flashed, voices shouted her name, but she looked calm, radiant. Reporters expected defensiveness, but instead she smiled and said, "I'm glad people are talking. If art doesn't challenge comfort, it's not doing its job." That quote, too, made headlines. By the weekend, something unexpected happened. The narrative shifted. Commentators began praising both women, not for their clash, but for how they handled it afterward. Articles read, "A masterclass in mutual respect, the power of real conversation. Scarlett and Whoopi prove women can disagree without destroying each other." The confrontation that had started as a spark had become a fire of introspection across millions of screens. Scarlett scrolled through one final article before bed that weekend. The headline read, "Scarlett Johansson shows strength in stillness." She smiled faintly. "Stillness," she whispered, almost to herself. "That's all it ever was." Outside, the night stretched across the skyline. The city's heartbeat pulsed steady and alive. And for the first time in months, she felt at peace, not because the world had understood her, but because she had finally stopped asking it to. Her voice echoed softly in the dark. "You can't heal in front of people who don't want you to." But maybe she thought the world was finally ready to listen. She turned off her phone, the last notification lighting up her screen before it went black. Prime narrator, new upload. Scarlett Johansson snaps back at Whoopi Goldberg, The View showdown. The thumbnail showed that electric stare between Scarlett and Whoopi, the calm before the storm. And somewhere, behind millions of screens, viewers hit play, ready to relive the moment all over again. What did you think of this explosive confrontation between Scarlett Johansson and Whoopi Goldberg? Was Scarlett right to hold her ground, or did Whoopi push too far? Share your thoughts below. And don't forget to hit like, comment, and subscribe to Prime Narrator for more shocking cinematic celebrity showdowns that pull you straight into the moment. Your story continues, right here on Prime Narrator.